Freud's most misunderstood idea, the hidden force behind every human desire. Why do two people stand before the same opportunity, and one feels a fire ignite inside them, while the other feels nothing at all? Why does one person spend a lifetime chasing a single dream, pouring years into a canvas, a business, a marriage, while another drifts from one interest to the next, never quite committing to anything? Why do we fall in love with people who cannot love us back? Why do we sacrifice comfort, money, even our own health, for something we cannot fully explain? Why does a stranger's face, glimpsed only once, stay with us for years? Why do some griefs never fully close, while others fade within weeks? Something moves beneath the surface of human behavior. We give it many names: passion, drive, instinct, hunger. We tell ourselves stories to explain it. We say we are ambitious by nature, or unlucky in love, or simply built a certain way. But underneath those stories, something older is at work, something that rarely announces itself. More than a century ago, a Viennese doctor gave that hidden force a name. He called it libido, and what he meant by that word was far stranger and far more interesting than most people today assume. Say the word aloud now, and it likely conjures a narrow, almost embarrassing meaning. But the man who coined its modern use intended something vast: an energy, a current, a force running through nearly every corner of a human life. This is the story of that idea, where it came from, what it actually meant, and why, even now more than 100 years after it was first written down, it refuses to be forgotten. In 1856, in a small town in what is now the Czech Republic, a boy was born who would spend his life trying to answer one question: what makes us do what we do? His name was Sigmund Freud. By the time he settled in Vienna as a young doctor, medicine had no real answer for the patients arriving in his office. Men and women with paralyzed limbs that had no physical cause. Women overtaken by fainting spells, tremors, and fears they could not name. The doctors of the era called it hysteria, and mostly, they did not know what to do with it. Some prescribed rest. Some prescribed electric shocks to the affected limbs. A few simply dismissed the patients as attention-seeking or beyond help. Freud tried something different. He began to listen instead of only examine. He asked his patients to speak freely without censoring themselves. And something remarkable happened. Symptoms that had resisted every medical treatment began, slowly, to loosen their grip. Not because of medicine, because of words. Freud came to believe that the mind held far more than what a person was aware of. Beneath ordinary thought, he proposed, ran a deeper current. Memories, wishes, and fears the conscious mind had pushed out of sight. He called this hidden layer the unconscious. And to explain what powered it, what gave it force and direction, he reached for a Latin word that already existed in medicine and philosophy: libido. It simply meant desire or longing. But Freud turned it into something much larger. He proposed that libido was a form of psychic energy, not electricity, not a fluid in the body, a kind of inner current that fuels the mind the way a river feeds everything that grows along its banks. Here is where most people, even today, get the idea wrong. They hear the word libido and think only of sex. That is not entirely their fault. Freud did believe sexuality was a central part of this energy, and he wrote about it more openly than almost any thinker before him. But he never meant that everything in human life reduces to sexual desire in the narrow sense. For Freud, libido was closer to a general life force, an energy that could attach itself to a person, an idea, a goal, a memory, or an ambition. Think of libido less as a single desire and more as a kind of current. A current that can be directed toward a lover, or redirected toward a painting, or a company someone builds from nothing, or a child a parent would die to protect. The object changes. The underlying current, Freud believed, remains. The same force, simply pointed in a different direction. He gave this redirection a name too: sublimation. The idea that energy which might have gone toward one outlet could be channeled into something else entirely, something society values, something lasting. An artist who never marries, who instead pours decades into a single, unfinished sculpture. A scientist who forgoes sleep, forgoes relationships, chasing a discovery that consumes every waking hour. A parent who gives up their own ambitions entirely, redirecting every ounce of that inner drive into a child's future. Freud looked at devotion like this and asked a quiet, uncomfortable question. What if genius and sacrifice and even love itself draw from the same? Well, picture a young man in his 20s. He works long hours at a job that does not interest him, and at night, in a small apartment, he writes. He is not writing for money. He has none. He is not writing for recognition. No one has read a word of it. He writes because something in him will not let him stop. Ask him why, and he may struggle to answer. Freud would have said, something beneath your awareness is driving this. Something you cannot fully name is finding its expression through the page. Or picture a woman who falls in love again and again with people who cannot commit to her. She tells herself this time will be different. It rarely is. She cannot explain the pattern. She only knows that she is drawn, almost against her own judgment, toward the same kind of unavailable affection. Freud would have pointed to something unresolved, buried far below, conscious memory, quietly repeating itself through her choices. Or picture a father who works 16-hour days. He tells his family it is for their future, and it is. But there is also something else moving through him, a hunger for significance, for proof that his life amounts to something. He may never examine that hunger closely. Most people never do. That is precisely Freud's point. The current runs whether or not we look at it. This is where libido connects to the deeper architecture of Freud's thinking, the unconscious mind itself. Freud believed the conscious mind, the part we experience as ourselves, is only a small portion of who we actually are. Underneath it lies a much larger space, filled with desires we have suppressed, memories we have buried, and instincts we were taught since childhood to hide. He believed libido lived primarily in this hidden space, and that much of what drives our daily behavior is shaped there, invisibly, long before it reaches conscious thought. We choose a partner and believe the choice was entirely rational. We pursue a career and believe ambition alone explains it. We fall into old patterns again and again and call it coincidence or bad luck or simply who we are. Freud suggested something less comfortable, that we are, in many ways, driven by forces we do not see, shaped by experiences we no longer consciously remember, and moved by desires we have learned to disguise, even from ourselves. He was not offering this as proven fact. He was offering it as an interpretation drawn from years spent listening closely to human beings in pain, searching for patterns beneath their words. Whether or not one accepts every detail of his theory, the underlying suggestion still unsettles us, that we may not fully know our own reasons for the choices we make. Consider how often libido, in Freud's broad sense, might quietly move through an ordinary week. A person stays late at work, not because the deadline truly demands it, but because achievement offers a feeling that something else in life is missing. A person scrolls endlessly through the profile of someone they cannot have, drawn back again and again by a pull they cannot fully explain. An artist stares at a blank canvas for hours until something wells up that has been waiting, perhaps for years, to be expressed. A person gives endlessly to others, exhausting themselves in the process, driven by a need to be needed that runs deeper than simple kindness. Someone competes fiercely for recognition at work, chasing a promotion that will not, in itself, bring the satisfaction they are quietly hoping for. Someone searches for a partner not for the qualities they say matter, but because of something older, something formed long before they ever chose a type. Freud would say these are not separate impulses. They are the same underlying current, libido, finding different channels through which to move. Love, ambition, art, recognition, attachment, different rivers, the same source. There is another kind of story Freud returned to often, one that involves loss rather than desire. Picture someone who has recently gone through a painful separation. For weeks, they cannot write, cannot create, cannot bring themselves to start the projects that once excited them. Friends tell them to move on, to focus on something else, and they try. But the motivation simply is not there. Freud would have said this absence is as telling as any presence. If libido is the current that fuels ambition, creativity, and desire, then Heartbreak represents a kind of dam. The energy has not vanished. It has been withdrawn, turned inward, tied up in mourning what was lost. Freud wrote about this directly, describing how the mind, faced with the loss of someone it was deeply attached to, must slowly, painfully detach its libido from that person, piece by piece, before it can reinvest that energy elsewhere. This is part of why grief exhausts us so completely. It is not passive sadness. In Freud's framework, it is active, difficult work, the mind quietly renegotiating where its deepest currents will flow next. And it is why, in time, most people do eventually return to painting again, or writing again, or loving again. Not because the old wound disappeared, but because the current, redirected, finally found a new channel. It would be dishonest, however, to present Freud's theory as settled science. Modern psychology has moved a long way from Freud's original framework. Contemporary researchers explain human motivation through a much wider lens: genetics, brain chemistry, early attachment patterns, culture, environment, and lived experience, working together in ways far more complex than a single unified energy. Many of Freud's specific claims, particularly around childhood, development, and sexuality, are now considered outdated, unsupported by evidence, or simply too broad to test scientifically. Psychology today favors approaches built on measurable behavior, controlled study, and evidence that can be replicated rather than the case studies and introspection Freud relied upon. Critics, both during his lifetime and long after, have pointed out that many of Freud's theories cannot be tested or disproven in any rigorous way, which makes them difficult to defend as science in the modern sense. Some have argued that Freud generalized too broadly from a small number of patients, mostly wealthy Viennese women, and built sweeping claims about all of human nature from a narrow and unusual sample. These are fair and important criticisms and no honest account of Freud's work can leave them out. And yet, Freud's influence has not disappeared. The idea that unconscious processes shape behavior. The idea that early experience leaves a lasting imprint. The idea that talking honestly about inner life can be a form of healing. These threads, in one form or another, still run through modern therapy, psychology, and how we understand ourselves. Freud was not always right, but he was among the first to insist that the human mind deserved to be studied with the same seriousness once reserved for the body. That alone changed the direction of an entire field. So the question remains, quiet and unresolved, the same question Freud spent his life circling. What actually drives a human being? Is it reason? Do we weigh our choices, calculate our outcomes, and act accordingly, the way we like to believe we do? Or is something older moving beneath that reasoning, something we rarely turn to look at directly? Why does one memory return to us, uninvited, at 3 in the morning? Why do certain faces, certain voices, certain kinds of love feel inevitable, as though we were always going to be drawn toward them? Why does a person who has achieved everything they once wanted still feel, somewhere inside, that something is missing? Think of the executive who finally reaches the position they spent 20 years pursuing, only to feel, within months, restless again already, eyeing the next summit. Think of the person who finally wins back the love they always wanted, only to find the old anxieties returning in a different shape, attached now to a new fear of losing it. If motivation were purely rational, satisfaction should follow achievement, and yet, so often, it does not. Freud would suggest that the goal was never really the goal, that the promotion, the relationship, the finished novel were simply the visible surface of a current running towards something deeper, something the achievement itself could never fully satisfy. Freud did not claim to answer these questions completely. He claimed only that the questions were worth asking, and that the answers, if they existed, would not be found on the surface. Perhaps that is the real inheritance of Freud's idea of libido, not a fixed theory to accept or reject, but an invitation to look inward, past the reasons we give ourselves, toward the currents running quietly beneath them, the ambition that never rests, the love that returns to the same shape again and again, the art that insists on being made, whether or not anyone ever sees it. Perhaps these are not separate mysteries. Perhaps they are the same mystery, wearing different faces. And perhaps understanding ourselves does not begin with having every answer. It begins with noticing that the question was there all along, quietly, shaping a life long before we ever thought to ask it. Freud himself never claimed to have solved the mystery he uncovered. Even near the end of his life, ill and in exile from a Europe collapsing into war, he continued revising his own theories, questioning his own earlier certainty. He understood, perhaps better than his critics gave him credit for, that the mind he was describing would always resist being fully mapped. There is something honest in that. A man who spent his life insisting that we do not know ourselves as well as we think, and who, in the end, admitted he did not know everything either. Maybe that unfinished quality is the most useful part of what he left behind. Not a complete answer. A better question. Not certainty about what drives us. Permission to wonder. The two people standing before the same opportunity, one moved and one unmoved, are not so different after all. Something in each of them is simply pointed in a different direction, shaped by a history neither of them fully remembers, flowing toward an object neither of them fully chose. Call it libido, call it desire, call it whatever word fits the century you live in. The current was there before Freud gave it a name, and it will be there long after his name is forgotten too. If this exploration of Freud's mind gave you something to sit with, consider staying a while longer. Like this video if it moved something in you. Subscribe to Aion Sophia and turn on notifications if you want to keep uncovering these forgotten corners of psychology and philosophy together. And before you go, I want to leave you with the same question Freud spent his life pursuing. Do you think our deepest motivations come from conscious choices, or from forces we rarely notice, moving quietly beneath everything we call our own decisions? Leave your thoughts below. I read every one. Some rivers run in the light. Others, we only ever see by the shape of what they carve.